Welcome to the Family Skeptical, Parenting Through Non-Belief.
We're a married atheist couple raising two wonderful, strange children. We ask big questions, dissect weird parenting moments, and examine how society ignores or misrepresents families like ours. If you're any stripe of non-believer who's involved in raising children, welcome. You are our people.
Our kids have heard all our swears, but yours might not have, so be thoughtful if there are young people listening with you. Hey, Pops.
Hey, Moms.
It's a little bit of a stressful weekend.
How so?
I don't know. I feel like we just have a lot of things we need to get done, including
we always
this.
have a lot of things that we need to get done.
Well, that's true. I have two fun stories, though.
Sure.
So I don't think we talked much about it on the podcast, except for watching the Scrooged musical.
Okay.
But I have been posting about our holiday movies a lot on Instagram, if anybody follows us there. And we finally finished up watching holiday movies. And our final sort of unofficial holiday movie that we watched was Rent, which is the first time that we've shown the boys that. And except for things like Scrooged, I also don't think they've seen many musicals other than like kind of White Christmas or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they loved it. And they've been listening to it a lot, which is very charming. A couple of nights we've gone in and after Vitor is asleep, and it's clear that he fell asleep listening to the soundtrack because it's playing in his room.
Indeed.
But we were hanging out doing something last weekend, and there is a line in the musical. So Rent is a musical about New York in the 90s?
Correct.
Yeah, New York in the 90s. And part of the plot is that the main character's friend has kind of gone corporate. And near where they live is a homeless encampment, and they want it cleared out before Christmas to make the street more appealing to moneyed investors. And there is a line in the song where they're talking about this, where one of the heroes in the musical, after their kind of ex-friend has said, "This is the plan," says, "Happy birthday, Jesus." And Reader really liked the line, and he was repeating it. And I asked if he kind of understood what that meant, and he said no. And so I explained that it was sarcastic, that, you know, Jesus was an interesting figure and said a lot of contradictory things. But one thing he spoke about pretty consistently was helping the poor and helping the least of us. So here is this ex-friend of theirs saying, "Hey, it's Christmas. Let's go kick all of these homeless people out of their homes." And so Collins is saying, you know, "Happy birthday, Jesus. Oh, what a profoundly un-Jesus-like act on this day, celebrating his birth." Mm-hmm. And so it was really kind of about that aspect of Jesus. And I'm going through this little description, and Go is there too. And Go's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa."
Literally.
But if Jesus is God, he could have just solved that problem.
Yeah, the whole Trinity thing makes everything worse.
I was just like, not a bad point.
But you got to remember that when he was on Earth, he was of flesh. He didn't have that sort of ascended godhood yet. And so technically speaking, no, he couldn't have.
Yeah.
But yes, the problem of suffering in that aspect of the problem of evil persists unresolved, no matter what apologists claim.
But I love that it wasn't even the point of what I was talking about.
No.
I didn't even bring it up.
He went straight to the hard philosophical debate. Good on him.
He did. And I was like,
bring a tear to my eye.
Yeah, it was very special. And I was like, that's why I think it's really interesting as a story. And it gets real problematic as soon as you start trying to think about it as a reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was just charming. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up on one of the past episodes, I talked about how I try not to put more effort into things than the boys are going to.
Yes.
And Reader has had some interest in kind of movie making. One of his good friends is doing some of that stuff. So he's downloaded an app where he can edit, and they've played around with it a little bit. And this morning, I thought we were going to do something entirely different, but I came upstairs and Reader had already organized a film shoot with costumes and other stuff. And I was like, cool. And so he needed me to play cameraman. So I did that. And then
it was very sweet, by the way.
It was. But the really cool thing is that, so we've done some movie making in the past. The first stuff we did, I edited everything because they just kind of weren't at a point where they could do that.
Right.
And then the last thing they did, he edited. And then for this one, he was like, oh, I need some help, because I want to put in some effects and music. It was really a trailer. He wanted to make a trailer. And so the issue is I've done some movie editing, but it was a long time ago. So I don't really have the skills that he wants.
Right.
And so we finished up, and I knew that Go would want to do some pretend play today, and it was kind of a good time to do it. And so I was like, you know what? You know what editing software you have? Look up some videos, just type in that name, type in special effects, and see what you can figure out. And Go and I did our little bit of pretend, and Reader had just been in his room. And so I was like, you know what? There's 60% chance I go in there and he is no longer looking at editing videos. He's watching something else.
Oh no, he fully was into it to the point where I was like, hey dude, we should go try Yahtzee, since none of us had ever played Yahtzee before. I know I'm a bad human being. But he absolutely 100%, he was fully immersed.
Dude, over the course of the morning, he taught himself how to do green screen.
Yeah, I know. It's insane.
I know these programs are just getting better and better and making it easier and easier, but he totally did it. I don't know. I feel like every day with them, I'm just they're getting to that point where they can be people.
Yes.
And learn things and figure out their own interests. And what he has cut is so good. I don't know if he's shown it to you yet. You gotta see it. Not yet. It's real. It's got the whole trailer feel. He did it. He totally did it. Yeah. Yeah. It's quite spectacular. So, I don't know. All of that was cool. For our first topic, I want us to do something which we have never done before. Do you want to know what that is?
No, I'm afraid.
It is actually think about when one of our episodes is going to drop and do something timely to that date.
Indeed. Well, you mentioned that you wanted to, but I still had my doubts.
Yeah, no, this is going to drop on Valentine's Day. And so I thought we should take advantage of that and actually talk about something relevant, which almost every other podcast on the planet thinks about and does. But we've ignored up until this point.
Potato.
Totally. So I know in the last episode, we talked about Under the Influence with Joe Piazza, but
yes,
I was thinking about it again because one of the influencers that she follows is a woman who goes by the handle Ballerina Farm. Yeah,
Ballerina Farm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the name of the farm. Is Ballerina Farm?
I
Or is
honestly
it not
don't
a
follow
farm?
it. She was a ballerina at some point, and they own a farm. Maybe it's
Okay.
called, who knows? I don't follow it enough to know, but she's a very popular influencer. And she just had a baby.
Okay.
And she's been posting all of these pictures postpartum where
Okay.
like her body looks totally back to normal. She's like getting dressed up for events. She's doing all of this. And I guess a lot of women have been watching this online and feeling very bad about themselves because that was not their postpartum experience.
Right.
And so I don't want to talk about postpartum, but it was just making me think about kind of the images that people project online. And as a couple, I was just thinking about that in terms of Valentine's Day, because a couple of times I have thought about, I don't know, like talking about being married on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like though we have a very good relationship, I feel like I have no relationship advice to give.
Okay.
And can take very little credit for that.
Okay.
And so I was curious heading into Valentine's Day if you feel like you have anything to say about our relationship or how we've figured out marriage.
Have we figured out marriage?
I don't know.
I don't feel like we've figured out marriage. I think that we've stayed together. I think that after, good Lord, after almost 17 years is an achievement unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of couples don't get that far. And for whatever reason, sometimes that's a good thing that relationships like that don't last. Sometimes it's for the best.
Oh, 100%.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I could give is don't look to long standing, marriages or relationships and view that as some sort of ideal to that you make all of your other needs and goals subservient to. Like if in other words, if a relationship is meant to be long lasting, then it needs to first allow you to be the person that you're supposed to be. Right? Like, like a good partner isn't going to stand in the way of you being you. And that comes to, that is regarding your goals professionally and personally. That regards, your sex life and your kinks. That regards, your parenting style, whether or not you want to have children. Like all of those things are, they speak to who you are as a person. And if there is any sort of disconnect or misalignment, then that needs to be addressed. And if it can be addressed, then discrepancies between you and your partner allow for a long relationship. And if they can't be addressed, or if there's certain ground that people can't give, that's fine. Then the relationship should end. I think that we are of a generation where people really started to see marriage as, even though divorce was increasingly common through our parents' generation, that our generation started to see marriage more and more, leading to subsequent generations ramping it up even more than us, as something that shouldn't be considered permanent at its face. That permanence is not a virtue. That permanence is earned. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice, is that if it's to be permanent, then it needs to earn its permanence, that it shouldn't be granted permanence by the virtue of the fact that it is this thing that you did in front of other people under the eyes of whatever deity you choose and, the purview of the law of the land. Like that, none of that matters to whether or not it should persist.
Yeah, I always think about Dan Savage with that. There's
Sure, yeah.
a lot I don't agree with him about, but
You mean that
Dan
everybody
Savage,
should be polyamory or whatever?
yeah, I think it's I don't know. Polyamory, I know here's my thing with polyamory. One, so Dan Savage hosts the Savage Love podcast. He's been giving sex and relationship advice for forever. He is a gay man, and kind of got his start, I feel like, sort of teaching people in the straight community about stuff that gay people had figured out.
Correct. Yes. It was like a Queer Eye type of thing.
Yeah. Some of his advice is great. He's like a lot of people has taken kind of a hard turn towards polyamory. I don't have anything against polyamory.
No.
One, I think it's way easier when you are gay and you and your partner can be equally attracted to the same person.
Mm.
And,
or at least there's a greater chance, I think.
Yes, there's a greater chance. And two, my thing is, like, coming back to what I just said, I think relationships are incredibly difficult. And there's, like, towards what you said, do we have it figured out? Like, even the best, most kind of aspirational couples that I know that I can think of, there's like no relationship where I look at it and think, oh, they've got everything worked out. Like, there are no issues there that they have to address. Like, I just think being in long-term relationship with another person is incredibly hard and takes a huge amount of work. And maybe I'm just worse at this than most people, but
You're worse at it than most people.
Okay, but given that...
No, you're really good at it.
But I think people are overestimating their their capacity to do that, like, incredibly hard work with multiple people. I don't know. I mean, that
it does.
I could just
like
be
the whole
stuck
polyamory
in the mud
thing
and like
does,
not get it. But
yeah.
I just think it's so hard to make it work with one person. All of these people being like, I can totally pull that off with multiple people.
It sounds really
know.
tiring, is what it does. It sounds very tiring.
It does. Like, I have no desire to do it. Like, I'm with you. That sounds exhausting on a level I don't want to deal with.
Like, we saw A Big Love, and that was just like one dude and, 3 wives. How on earth are you like, I don't get it. I can't imagine the amount of stress. I would not fare well. I can barely handle one.
Yeah. I feel the same. Like, I don't know. It just, nothing about that seems appealing. But circling back, one thing he says that I do really agree with is he's really pushed back against this idea that, like, a good relationship is defined as reaching the point where one of the partners dies. Like, making it to expiration as equaling success. And that's a ridiculous metric to use for the health and success of a relationship. Like, there are short-term relationships that can be huge successes if it was good for the time you were together and left you both in a better place. And, like, that can be a 100% successful relationship. So, yeah. But I think that the thing I find so interesting is that I feel like every time we've struggled, it's not necessarily been about the relationship, but it's been about one of us working through things.
Yeah.
And
sure. No, that is where partnership is very valuable. Because we leaned on each other.
Well, I mean, yes, but also in those moments, like, I feel like you helped me a lot. There are moments where, like, I knew you were struggling and I had no idea what to do. And
you're a really good listener. You do not, I think, appreciate how valuable you are as a sounding board. And that maybe that like that's how I process better, and I just need more time to turn the corner or whatever. But whatever it is that you like, I feel better now that than I have in a long time. I feel like I cope better with things, and I have a better grasp of who I am and what goals I need to achieve. And I credit you with a lot of that, because you've sort of just been there to help sort of shape that version of me. Not just by giving advice, but by like helping me realize the advice that I was giving myself that might have not necessarily been super productive. You know, you helped sometimes eliminate possible courses of action, and that's a good thing too. And you're always like my biggest cheerleader. You're better at this than I think you're giving yourself credit for.
Aw. I mean, and I always tell people that you are always my like biggest booster and supporter. But there were times where like you definitely weren't talking about things, and I had no idea how to change the tide on that. Like absolutely none. I just feel incredibly lucky that you like worked it out on your own and took steps to
but that's what I'm
things.
saying is that I didn't work it out on my own. Like I don't think that you're allowing yourself the grace of understanding what you did. Like, just because you didn't give me the answer doesn't mean that you didn't offer, an environment in which the answer could be forthcoming, is my point. Is that you helped me by, winnowing away the bad ideas and helping me focus on the good. And just by listening and being there and being supportive in general, you let courses correct on their own, or you did give advice that I don't think that you realized was as powerful as it was.
Wow. I had no idea.
Well, that's because you never asked.
Yeah. All right. Can I ask you something? I was thinking about this the other day. So there's been a joke between us, because when we first met, you called me.
You mean even keel moms?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not even keel. You were an absolute emotional wreck for a really long time, but now you are. Like the last like year and a half, you're absolutely the person. Like, you've earned the moniker, and now it's not a joke anymore, because you're just kind of like, you're very good at like going with the flow and not getting super upset when, plans don't pan out exactly as you need, or when, people disappoint you professionally or stuff. Like, it's really commendable. You've worked on yourself as much as I have worked on myself. And you should be proud of yourself.
For a long time, I did not feel that way, but something happened at work, and I came home, and it just like had not fazed me. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm really even keeled. Maybe I'm finally there.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that you've worked it out to a large degree.
Yeah, I think it helps that we both tried very hard to address our individual issues.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Is there anything else we should say about relationships?
Oh God, no! Please make it stop.
Oh, can I say one other thing? Which would be like my tiny piece of advice.
What?
I think looks are like probably one of the least important aspects of a relationship. And like, obviously, part of our wedding vows were that we would love each other's bodies as they change. And so kind of regardless of what your significant other looks like when you meet.
Which in jest has also become an in-joke.
Yes, absolutely. But I think it also, I think it helps to be like within the world of your significant other's preferences. Like, whenever you talk about like famous people that you find attractive, I'm like, oh, I see the Venn diagram. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, like clearly I'm not as gorgeous as like whoever, but I'm like, I got high cheekbones and pretty eyes, or, like, I think it helps it like, and my Venn diagram is like super weird, but like,
well, it's like Orlando Bloom, but with really good calves.
What are you talking about?
That I look like Orlando Bloom, but with really good calves.
That's not the first description I would do.
Well, that's because you haven't thought about this.
To Orlando Bloom.
But he's Orlando Bloom. But
you fully, like, I think I'm way more attracted to like kind of like quirks, like people's smiles and like a particular type. But all the guys who like sort of turn my head just for looks are dark haired and kind of have a wrestler's build. And that is exactly you. So once again,
shucks.
And you do have an incredibly charming smile, which is probably the thing that
shucks.
Okay. I love you. I'm glad we're together.
I'm glad we're together too.
Okay, for a second topic, this is an interesting one that is also sort of like, just what do you think about this? But
yeah,
I really want to talk about it because it keeps coming up. So when we were talking about trad wives, one thing that came up with some of them, particularly the specific woman I talked about, like wild mothering.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about allowing women to be soft.
Yeah.
But I have gotten way more interested in this topic because it's intriguing. So hang on, let me pull up. I took notes. Here we go. Okay. This idea of a soft life intersects so many interesting things to me. So apparently, from my bit of research that I did, the soft life trend, so it's about thinking about creating a life more of leisure with like less stress. I don't know if leisure is the right word, but more of kind of an unhurried, unburdened, less stressed life. And it actually originated with Nigerian influencers, and was kind of about like rejecting hustle culture. And so I'm not going to speak to that because like that is a community I don't understand. I don't know like all the intricacies of how it originated and kind of the sub meanings. But now you see it a lot, and you see it in so many places. So there's like the trad wife use of it, talking about a soft life, which is really talking about like women needing to be soft and men needing to be like sort of the adventurous go-getter ones. And you also see it in kind of like non-trad wife, but just kind of Christian discourse with women, talking about needing to be soft. But then Courtney Wyckoff, who runs Mama Strong, which is an exercise program I do, which is so amazing, who is about as far from a trad wife as you can get. She is a business owner. She's a single mom of 3 kids. She's like very liberal, incredibly cool. But she was just thinking about how to make life more soft. And then when I was looking at it, I found a Christian podcast. I think it's defunct at this point. It was called On Mission. And it was actually mainly all of the guests that I saw were Black, and it was done in England. They were all British. So, but they were talking about kind of this fad of the soft life and whether that was actually a Christian concept or matched Christianity. And their feeling was that it wasn't, that like kind of Christianity asks people in some ways to take on more burdens. And one of the hosts, I'll link to the actual episode. I actually liked it. I'm sad they're defunct. It was an interesting conversation. But he was talking about how sort of the way he saw the Christian message, it was more like what he took away from it was like to suffer well, but to also have a good time and to not let success go to your head. And so I am just interested in this concept. And I kind of have two takes on it. And I'm wondering if you have any initial thoughts from hearing that.
I was about to say, like, this just gives me flashbacks of our big conversations about gender roles. Like I don't care what the Bible says. I don't care what any holy book says. As a humanist, I care about the nuts and bolts of how a person's actions affect their community. First, whether or not those actions are harmful to themselves, and then how those actions spread out into the community. And so if pursuing a softer life by virtue of you having some sort of like anxiety-based situation that isn't doing you any good, that's actually harming your relationships with your family, with your children, with your spouse, whatever, then taking the foot off the gas might be the best thing that you do, not just for yourself, but for others in your circle.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing it as being this specifically, is it of the Bible? Is it not of the Bible? I couldn't care less. I care about its utility. There are like my need for that sort of, do the work, but don't burn the candle at both ends. I know that I go through phases like that, and that's out of necessity, because if I have a lot of deadlines or whatever, then I'm going to need to burn the candle at both ends. But I can't do that all the time, and that's because I know myself, but everybody's different. So I think that looking to it as some sort of a lifestyle, I mean, you could be doing the family a disservice, because what if the tasks that you're doing require a lot of effort, or you're entering a point in your lives or a point in your annual schedule where you do need to push? Like it needs to be an ebb and flow, I think, more than, this spouse needs to do this thing, that spouse needs to do that thing. That there needs to be an ebb and flow of intensity, that you can't stay at max intensity all the time. You have to figure out what your intensity level can be sustainably, and that's different for everybody. And then you have to figure out what you do to compensate for that. I think anything else is foolishness, because you're just going to run yourself ragged, and then you're going to have diminishing returns. And then those diminishing returns are going to spread outward into the rest of your life. And then other people are going to, have bad outcomes, perhaps because you didn't know how to be kind to yourself. We've talked about that too, about how being a good parent, in our estimation at least, requires that you treat yourself as a person. And that means being kind to yourself. If you need a day where you do jack fuck all, then you do that. But you have to know that that's what you need, and that's not just what you want to do because you're procrastinating. Procrastination also isn't in and of itself bad. It depends on how it falls in your life. Like I usually do 9 20-minute writing blocks a day, Monday through Friday. I keep a professional schedule as a writer, and it's done me a lot of favors. But yesterday, because I had a lot of other tasks that I'd been doing this week, and I also started spending 20 to 30 minutes a day playing guitar, and I'm doing the masterclass stuff now, which is super fun, like being back in the total learning and practice phase in other avenues of my life other than writing. I realized that I needed to give myself that grace of not going for the 9 units yesterday. And so I went to 8, which is only one less. But there was a time only scant like 2 years ago or so, before I journaled all this and before I kept track of my writing time, that doing 20 minutes on a day would have been a success. 1 unit, period. 1 unit a week. I wasn't writing at all. So I have to look at the big picture when I say to myself, oh, I'm going to give myself that grace of a little bit of an ease off of the gas pedal for this afternoon. And I felt so much better waking up this morning. I didn't feel like I was pushing myself. And that's a good thing, because I have a big deadline that I need to hit by end of day this Thursday. And I'm taking it very seriously, but that also means that I can't kill myself or my product suffers. But I know that about myself, and that's different for me than it would be for somebody else, perhaps. Most definitely. Mm-hmm. And so in listening to myself, I've come to that realization, and I have this process that works for me. Does it work for everybody? I don't know. But that whole idea of the soft life is exactly the same. Does it work for you? Okay, great. Does it work for you? Now, does it work for your family? And if it doesn't work for your family, but it works for you, then you might want to look at what your priorities are. And if it does work for you in like 1 day a week, you give yourself, okay, this is my day where I do the things that I absolutely need to do, but then everything else gets pushed to the wayside and I read a book for 2 hours straight. And if that's your recharge that gives you the power to be present and mindful and effective for the rest of your time, and that's great. You've hit gold. A lot of people have a hard time figuring that out about themselves, what they need that keeps them productive without losing any more time than they absolutely need in recharging. And so I think that the idea of recharging should be destigmatized and explored and then implemented in the most compelling way a person can. So I think we should reclaim the idea of soft life in favor of tactical recharging.
I like that, because I think I sort of think about it 2 ways. I mean, I know we always come back to gender stuff, but I do think it's very interesting that you never hear about this in terms of men. And that just seems so unfair, because
we don't get headaches that make us take like laudanum solutions. So let's be fair here.
But it does.
It is ridiculous. That's why I immediately went back to like all the bad taste of all. No offense to you or the audience, but the bad taste of all those, what are gender roles? That conversation, which is good to have.
Yeah, but as if no men are struggling with the stress of life, right? Like, this assumption that they can handle it
so ridiculous
easily and women can't. I just think that's like, I don't know, that
it's insulting. I feel insulted.
Yeah, like clearly I think everybody struggles with this, right? And
it's kind of the point of being a human being.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't know.
But it's interesting because it's like, basically like when I look at it in terms of modern capitalism, I'm like, it makes perfect sense. Like, yes, in terms of modern capitalism, we all have to think about ways to be softer, because like so much of modern work environments just make you feel constantly icky.
I like icky.
Constantly pressured, constantly at risk, like particularly in the United States where there are so few support systems for people who need it. Like if you lose your job, if stuff happens at work, like you can be profoundly screwed in ways that are very scary.
Health insurance coverage.
Yeah. So like in that sense, like as a cultural concept, I'm like, yeah, we have to think about ways where people can be a little softer with themselves, where like if one thing goes wrong, their life isn't going to blow up. And for people who have more resources and who have more options to like push back against work that says you have to be on all the time. Like you can never be off. You have to reply to emails 24 hours a day. You have to always, like in that context, I'm like, yeah, let's get a little softer. Like this is absurd. But when I think about it as far as private lives go,
yeah,
it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like I don't even know what it means, because I think, the thing with work, I mean, I think there's work that people do where like you have to really care because what you're doing actually changes lives, like, but there's a lot of work that people do where it's like, you don't have to be that stressed. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes. Well, it comes down to identity for a lot of people, especially in American culture. What they do day to day in a workplace is to a large degree like their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, there's this urgency to not, I guess, like to not like lose ground, to lose momentum, to let whatever slip, or I don't know, like it just feels, and I'm going to go by my feelings here. I'm going to get into my Seth Andrews voice. It feels like they're chasing an illusion, in that their desire to keep the job beyond the bare bones necessities of 401ks and health insurance and stability financially is that for a lot of people, they haven't taken the time to figure out who it is they want to be, and that they've allowed a 9-to-5 job to define who they are vis-a-vis what they do. And wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a society, I'm looking at you, Gene Roddenberry, where needs are supplied such that people have the luxury of pursuing what it is they're actually good at. And so they're not saddling their ego to a job that doesn't care about them. They would instead saddle their egos and all of their efforts to something that actually brings them joy. And by virtue of that, would lead to greater productivity and would enrich their entire community, nay, the whole world. And I might be speaking from a position of privilege. Hell, I probably am speaking from a position of privilege. But that is where I would love to see society go, where we don't have those jobs that don't matter define us as people, such that we are beaten into not actively searching out who we should be. And it's hard to do. And even with all of the time that I had in the transition of being a stay-at-home dad, those answers were not forthcoming readily. I had to search for them. Even though I had the benefit of more time than most to focus on that, it still took me a really long time, relatively, to figure all that out. So I guess maybe take heart that just because you're not happy now doesn't mean you won't be happy later. And just because you feel that your job is your world right now doesn't mean that that's what you necessarily should be doing. It just means that that's the rhythm you've settled into. And it goes to the whole like soft life thing again, where what value does it have? Like if it's a rhythm that's productive, then it's a rhythm that's productive. If you allow it to be what you do day to day to the point where it robs you of your drive to actually like seek out that which you should be doing, all caps, then it's a detriment.
But I think the reason it doesn't make sense to me in terms of private life is that, like, as a human in the world and a mom, I think what I've come to settle on is you kind of like just have to be ready for things being unexpectedly hard. Like, I don't know how you even institute the concept of a soft life. Like, I was thinking about, we mentioned ages ago that Reader had to go to the emergency room. And like, I think about that weekend and I was like preparing to have a super calm day and like be really chill. And then one of our cats scratched his eye and I had no idea how bad it was. And like in that instant, you were out shopping. I had to like, I just had to turn on a dime and be like, well, that is not how this day is going to go at all. This day is going to be like a hectic drive to the emergency room. And we were really lucky and nothing was wrong.
Right.
But it was just like, oh, this is just going to be hard. Surprise. Today is going to be hard. And I, you know, in so many contexts, you know, a spouse can have, you know, be struggling psychologically or have a health issue, or, you know, somebody else you know about can need support, or, you know, a natural disaster can have, like, I just, and those are not, and I don't think you have to, I'm not like arguing for panic and being constantly depressed, but I just don't, you know, those are all situations where you have to care. Like, there's not the option to be like, I'm not doing the hard thing. Like, there are just, I suppose you could not care about the outcome or not get emotionally involved in it, but I also don't know if that's what I would want life to look like. But in that more personal context, I'm like, I don't know. I think it's something else. Like, I like the idea. I like your idea of periodic recharging, because that to me feels way more realistic, of being like, there's going to be the hard day, but then I know I'm going to need to take the recharge day.
Right.
But I think, I don't know, it almost seems close to like the ridiculousness of like, God is good and going to take care of things. And it's like, no, like life is like, things just happen. And being an adult is just like knowing that periodically you're going to have to be like, oh, I did not know that today was going to be a roll up my sleeves day, but like, I guess here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
temperance. It's just a lot of temperance. It's constant temperance. It's rolling with the punches when it comes to external events, rolling with the punches when it comes to your internal responses and your emotional needs. It comes with rolling with the punches when it comes to disappointments with your goals. It's just a constant balance of staying on the tightrope. And sometimes you need support. And so I'll always ask, which brings us back to the head of the show, which is why I love you so much. Because you're always there for me.
Samesies. Well, thank you for talking that through with me. It was just, I kept seeing it and I was like, there's like interesting stuff about this. Definitely doesn't feel like something to lean into without interrogation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Well, let's wrap it up. I hope people enjoyed our ramblings on these two topics. We did
a little bit of extra rambling today. It was a little extra rambly.
Yeah, but you know, Valentine's Day.
A traditional Valentine's Day ramble?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I accept this.
All we're missing is chocolates.
Well, we are going to be making chocolate chip cookies this afternoon.
Yeah, which is why we need to wrap it up. So we are going to thank Jonathan Zalbin and First Frame Music for the music for this podcast.
And so that wraps up this Valentine's episode of The Family Skeptical, where nothing is sacred except for our kids. And that wraps up this Valentine's episode of A Family Skeptical. Are we a family skeptical or the family skeptical? I can't remember.
We're the family skeptical.
Yeah.